If you want to pass the CFP exam, you're going to have to put yourself in the shoes of a question writer. So in this video, I'm going to show you exactly how to do that so that you can walk into the CFP exam more confident and ready to pass than ever. Now, if you've been on this channel for a while, or if you're new here, I want to let you know that I am not a CFP exam prep person. There are people way more equipped to do this than myself, and I'll maybe link some of those people down in the show notes below. However, what I want to let you know is after a couple of rounds of sitting through writing exercises and these retreats that we go on, after you pass the exam, sometimes they'll ask practitioners like myself to come back and help write questions. And I've done this a couple of times. And so what I wanted to provide you with is this rubric for how these questions are structured. And I think it will help you attack and approach questions differently than what you may have previously thought about. So let's get into this. Now, the first thing I think you're going to have to think about is how these questions are structured and what they're trying to do. So if you think about it, every question is designed to do two things, okay? It's to assess your competency. How much do you know about the principal knowledge topics, which we'll be talking about in just a second, okay? Hold your horses here. The first thing that we're going to be testing for, or the questions are testing for, the exam is testing for, is your competence. So the candidate's competence. The second thing is it wants to measure your ability to be able to work independently when creating a comprehensive financial plan. So if you're thinking about this from a two-pronged approach, it's like this macro umbrella of body of knowledge of what you know, and then taking that knowledge to see if once applied, can you independently create a comprehensive financial plan? That's how you should be thinking about it. So in every question, you can almost come into the approach of, I definitely need to know the principal knowledge topics, and there's certain percentages which I will throw also down in the description of this video so you can kind of know about how much of each exam is made up of this principal knowledge topic or that principal knowledge topic, okay? And then you need to have several different ways to approach the knowledge or synthesize it, analyze it, if you will, to come up with recommendations for a financial plan, okay? So all of what we're going to talk about in the next few minutes is going to be designed for that. And I think I have time to maybe show a couple of questions to help you see how this is applied. Okay, so how do you gather information is going to be one particular thing, because in certain questions there will be case studies, right? Where you have to parse out and pull out certain bits of information in order to get to the answer. There's going to be you performing certain financial analysis using maybe formulas or different strategies that you've brought up in or that were brought up in the education process, okay? Also, you're going to have to develop, evaluate, and recommend strategies, okay? Based on the assessment of pertinent information. Now, what you're going to probably notice in just about every, at least case study question, you're going to have a lot of information that's not even pertinent to you getting an answer. And sometimes that trips candidates up. So what the exam writers are trying to test you, and like when we're sitting in these rooms, we're trying to say, let's dump all this knowledge in there, and real candidates that know their principal knowledge topics and understand how to construct a financial plan are going to pull out the stuff that's necessary, and they're going to throw away the stuff that's unnecessary. So know that in every question, there's always going to be a little extra in there that's designed there to kind of trip you up and maybe have you thinking on a path that is not necessarily going to lead you to the right answer, but it's just going to, I would hate to say confuse you, but really kind of confuse you. It's there to assess how much do you really know and how well do you really know it. Okay, so let's go through a set of criteria, because when I say it's there to confuse you or really assess what you know, you may be going, well, no, Dominic, it's there to confuse me. They're doing this on purpose, yada, yada, yada. If you have that type of mindset, I will let you know there is a certain set of criteria that each question has to go through before it sees the light of day. So there's several rounds of discussion and testing and really rigorous, what I would call debate on whether or not a question is good enough to make it to the exam. So you can rest assured that CFP practitioners have gone through these questions, several of them, in the same room, in the same setting before they hit the exam, okay? Here's question number 1. Does the item match a principal knowledge topic? So these questions are not being pulled out of the thin air. They're being, they are a product of the principal knowledge topic. So let's pause real quick and pull those up because I think it would be really helpful for you to know those. All right, let's get our technology together, see if we can pull this off. Okay, perfect. So we have our principal knowledge topics, which were last updated in 2021. And so here you can kind of see how the test is composed. So let's spend a little time here real quick. So I just noticed that I am not centered camera-wise. Okay, I think this is better. All right, so you got the professional conduct and regulations. So this is gonna kind of be the board of standards, the ethics, all that component is going to be in there. General principles of financial planning. You'll get a lot of maybe insurance questions, some the financial planning process, the 7-step financial process. You'll get that kind of stuff. And I won't go through all these, but this kind of gives you a rubric for where exam writers are pulling their questions. So when we write these questions, we have these areas. And then under them are like little bullets that are not here. Oh, here we go. Here we go. So underneath those are all these different subdomains, right? So we got the knowledge topics, and then underneath, for instance, professional conduct and regulation is the code of ethics, the procedural rules, the consumer protection laws. All those different things are there. And we craft our questions based on these little subdomains or these prompts in order to write the question. So I'm saying all this to tell you that there is no pulling questions, from wherever we want. There's definitely some design around that. So does the item match a principal knowledge topic? The other thing is it accurate? It's gotta be true from a content standpoint and from a grammatical standpoint, like punctuation, spelling, all that kind of stuff. Is the key, and these are some terms we're gonna use, the key is going to be the answer to the question, right? So let me give you an example of what I am talking about so that we will be on the same page. All right, so this item right here, this is the item. That's the question, okay? That's what they're asking. And then you have, these are options, okay? And then one of these is the right answer. That is called the key, okay? And the rest are going to be called distractors. They're just to get you away from the right answer, okay? So I had to give you that so we can talk about the rest of what we have to say here. Definitions are important. Like you need to know what we're talking about here. Okay, so is the key indisputably, is the answer indisputably correct? It's always correct at all times, no matter what, okay? Are the distractors clearly incorrect? Meaning that they can't be right some of the time. Where this kind of comes in is like, we're really careful when we write questions that are time sensitive, things like tax laws or percentages, especially tax laws where percentages on brackets can change. So questions like that you won't see as many on the test because they will give you tax tables. They'll do that to help you, but those type of questions are somewhat difficult because the distractors, have to be clearly incorrect, okay? What is the cognitive reading load, right? You can't, as a question writer, we're not gonna spend a whole lot of time with a ton of details, this big long paragraphs, really dense writing, that's a lot of words, no punctuation. The point is to keep it simple, get to the point, and move on, okay? So, even in your practice exams, you shouldn't see, I'm hoping you don't see this, where questions are just written really poorly. They're confusing, they don't flow, and it takes a lot to understand, just reading comprehension. The test is not designed to test your reading comprehension, it's designed to test your knowledge about the principal knowledge topics. So you shouldn't worry about questions like that. And then last but not least, does each rationale explain why the distractions are incorrect and the key is correct? So you don't get to see the rationale. unless you're taking a practice exam or something like that. But when we're writing these items, and then we have to write the keys and the distractors, we have to say why this key is correct. That's the rationale. And so you might want to think about it from this standpoint. Let me give you another insight to how this works. Okay, so what you want to think about is it's like this. It's principal knowledge topic leads to a question, or let's use those terms, item, okay, which leads to an answer or a key. And once you have the answer, it's really easy to come up with distractors, okay? And then we have the rationale. So when I was writing my questions, that was kind of the rubric in my head that I had. You know, what was the principal knowledge topic that we were trying to test for? What's a question that makes that brings out the candidate's knowledge about that, or can prove that they can independently create a comprehensive plan using this? And then what is the answer to that question? Then what are some distractors that I can get them going off on a different rabbit trail to see whether they really know this principal knowledge topic, and then writing the rationales for each of them. That is how it works, okay? All right, now moving on, because there are a couple of categories that I want you to be aware of as we bring this in for a landing, that the questions are broken down into like 4 categories, from easiest all the way to hardest. And you'll be able to tell these really quickly if you've gone through any like number of questions. And when I'm talking about like hundreds or thousands of questions, you'll know this from the get-go. First, you have those, what I call those knowledge and comprehensive questions. These are the easiest questions. They're just defining terms, making sure you understand concepts, kind of recalling facts, things like that, okay? The next one is application of knowledge, right? So now that you know these facts or know these concepts, how do you apply it, right? That would be like a level 2. Now, the exam doesn't have a lot of those questions on there. They're sprinkled in there, but there's not a lot in the 170 questions. What you're really going to get tested on are the next 2 categories that I'm going to talk about. The first one is analysis and synthesis, right? So how can you think about a puzzle that has pieces all scattered around, and then you got to put the puzzle together. You got to work on the border first, then you got to start filling in the middle, right? If you can take things that have been scrambled and put together, then we're talking about you have been able to analyze and synthesize. And the whole point is to analyze and synthesize so that you get to an answer, so that you get to a recommendation, so that you get to a strategy that you can give to the clients. Remember, we're testing knowledge. The exam is testing knowledge, it's testing your competency. And what's the second one? Do you remember? How well you can independently construct a financial plan. So when these type of questions test that. And then last but not least are the evaluation questions. So given a set of criteria or a set of pertinent information, you got to make a judgment call now, right? On what is the best next step for a client. That is the 4 levels that you're going to have to think through when it comes to it. Now, I think I have time to walk through a question. I'm not going to answer this, or we're not going to really talk about answers per se, because that's not the scope of what we're doing here. But give me a second. Let me pull up another plain question without the... Okay, so this question says, a CFP professional is a registered investment advisor managing $120 million in assets. One of the CFP professional's clients sends a complaint letter to the CFP professional. So if you're thinking about through this right now, all of a sudden you already know which domain this is in. This is going to be in that ethics domain, that like the board of standards, that first one that we had that like, I think it's 8% of the test there. So that's where this is falling. Complaining that certain trades were not properly executed. So we got a client complaint. During the investigation, it is discovered that the client never received the firm's Form ADV. So this is the firm brochure written in plain English that explains to the client pricing, how to get their refunds, the type of investments that they use, the strategies, blah, blah, blah. It's all that kind of stuff. Which governing body has ultimate authority over lack of regularly disclosure for this matter? So who would, I hate to use the term punished, but what entity of the 4 listed here are going to be responsible for the lack of disclosure in this particular firm's case? Okay, so let's see if I can mark this up. I can't. Let's go back to, I want to just point out some things. We may talk about an answer. We're already a little long on this video, but let's look at it like this. Okay, so the first thing I would kind of look at is when I'm trying to figure out, I know in my mind that there are certain levels to where firms are regulated at the state level, at the SEC level, whether or not they're FINRA, all those different things. So when I see this, when I see registered investment advisor, I go, it's probably not FINRA because it's a registered investment advisor. I think it would have said something like broker dealer, would have thrown that in there if it was FINRA. So in my mind, I'm thinking FINRA's not the answer here. Okay. The other thing is managing 120 million in assets. Bingo. So if I'm not mistaken, I believe 100 million in assets or a certain amount of client accounts is SEC registration automatically. So that rings a bell for me. I already know it's not going to be the firm's compliance department. And there is no oversight here, governing body that is going to be, punitive in nature. That's the CFP board. So I've already, based on just what I'm reading here, it eliminated these 2. Okay, so I'm down to 2, which is always good because now I got my 50-50 chance of being right. Okay, so one of the CFP's professionals sends a complaint letter, which governing body has ultimate authority over. I think the other key with this is ultimate authority. CFP board does not have ultimate authority over things. The firm's compliance department never has ultimate authority over anything. We're going to be looking at either FINRA or SEC. I'm going to lean towards the SEC because of the $120 million in assets and the registered investment advisor clues that they have right there. Okay, so that would be my best answer. Okay, that's the option that I would choose. In breaking this down again, this item right here with these particular options, okay, do you see how I kind of went through? Because at the end of the day, they're testing my knowledge about governing bodies. They're going back to that very first, they're going back to the professional conduct and regulation. That's where they're headed, right? So knowing these type of things, I'm hoping that it will give you a little bit more confidence as you are walking into the CFP exam, okay? Because this is a hard exam. You do not want to have to study for it again. But now that you know how CFP exam writers think, your next step is to start to apply this knowledge to your study routine. And a great video to help you with that is everything you need to know about how to answer CFP questions. In it, I'm going to give away my #1 hack for breaking down CFP questions that I use on my exam to help me pass on the first try. So check that out when you get a chance, and I'll see you in the next video.